the Nonprofit Podcast, powered by DonorBox.
As the year comes to a close and you finally get a moment to slow down and reflect, do you ever feel like you've given everything to your nonprofit work and have little energy left for you? Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Britt Stockert, fundraising strategist at DonorBox. We're here each week with practical actions you can use today to increase donations and take your nonprofit to the next level tomorrow. Burnout isn't inevitable. Today, we'll explore why it happens and, more importantly, how to foster resilience, not just individually, but collectively. This episode is for all nonprofit leaders, staff, and volunteers seeking to sustain their passion for the long haul. Let's be honest for a moment. The work we do is beautiful. It's meaningful, but it can also be incredibly demanding. The long hours, the passion, the pressure, it's a lot. And if, like me, you're a highly sensitive person, or simply poured your all into your work, you now feel like there's not much left for yourself. With the holidays around the corner, it's a time to slow down, recharge, and reconnect with ourselves. But are we making space for that? How are you planning to spend the last weeks of 2024? Will you take time to reflect, heal, and build a more resilient environment come 2025? Where you can stay committed to your mission without burning out or overwhelming your team? All right. I know this is a lot to think about, especially at the end of a busy year. So let's start with a really important question. Why is it that so many of us, especially those of us who are highly sensitive people or empaths, are drawn to nonprofit work in the first place? Well, let's face it, many of us in this field were naturally wired for empathy. We're the ones we notice the small things, the subtle cues others might miss. We feel deeply, we care deeply, and oftentimes we pour our whole hearts into our work. It is part of who we are, what drew us to the nonprofit sector in the first place, because it aligns with our values. But here's the catch. If empathy is our superpower, our emotional vulnerability is our kryptonite, making us more vulnerable to harm and burnout. We're in the nonprofit world, so often we're walking a tightrope, trying to balance the unending needs of donors, funders, volunteers, clients, board members, and partners. And each of these relationships carries stress, dynamics, expectations that demand we pivot, we respond, and deliver inside a resource-constrained and high-stakes environment. For an executive director, this can be particularly crushing. It's a burden because we're navigating complicated board relationships, egos, and power struggles. It wears us out over time, right? And we're not just trying to move the mission forward and meet the varied interests of different stakeholders, but most often we're doing so without resources. And truthfully, we don't always have the skill set to navigate these difficult situations. These are layered upon even deeper, more systemic issues. Let's talk about them. Poor pay, few benefits, and crushing workloads that leave little time to catch one's breath. And for highly sensitive people and empaths, it's not just about managing these relationships. We absorb them. Every detail, every emotion, and when those emotions aren't ours to carry, they weigh us down in ways we don't always recognize. Burnout, it's not an individual problem. This is a shared challenge, one that requires collective solutions if we want to build resilient careers in the nonprofit sector and truly thrive in our missions. So let's take a moment to think about what this burnout really looks like, because it's not always what you expect. As a working mom of a little girl, her name is Willa, she loves pasta, I like to think of it like this. Imagine putting too much pasta in a pot of overly salted water. It's heating on the stove. It's a slow boil that suddenly it just erupts. And that's what happens when we, as empathetic nonprofit professionals, take on too much. It's a slow simmer of burnout, and it can quickly boil into secondary trauma, a heavy burden we carry after absorbing the pain, struggles, and traumatic stories of those we serve. And like you, I've walked that path. Burnout and workplace trauma don't typically announce themselves with fireworks. They creep in quietly, start small, and build over time. And these symptoms can show up in surprising ways: chronic fatigue, relentless headaches or muscle tension, and even emotional numbness that leaves you disconnected from the work you once found meaningful. Anxiety heightens, sleep becomes elusive, and even minor triggers can become overwhelming. These symptoms, known as secondary trauma, are more than just stress. They stem from constant exposure to hardship and other suffering. Anxiety, hypervigilance, irritability, sadness, and guilt can take hold. It might manifest physically as fatigue, tension, frequent sickness, or cognitive difficulties like racing thoughts and trouble focusing. You might find yourself avoiding people, withdrawing socially, or overworking to numb your emotions. But here's the good news. Recognizing these signs is the first step towards healing. You are not alone. Calling it out, admitting that secondary trauma and burnout are real and pervasive, helps us take a collective breath. And if you need proof, look to the nonprofit Hive's recent survey led by my dear friend Tasha Van Vlack. 77% of 204 nonprofit professionals reported experiencing severe total burnout, citing lack of support, excessive workload, emotional exhaustion, unclear roles, and poor work-life balance. So friends, let's take a deep breath. We're in this together. Let's acknowledge it, support one another, and start taking steps toward a more sustainable way to carry our missions and emotional well-being forward. So you might ask, Britt, what are some simple, actionable ways to tackle burnout or secondary trauma? You probably listen to your fair share of podcasts and webinars about burnout. It's all on LinkedIn. It's everywhere, right? Most of them offer similar advice, but here's the catch. They tend to place all of the responsibility on you. It's all about what you can do to manage your own burnout. But here's the thing. If there's one thing you won't hear in this episode with me, oh no, it's an overwhelming focus on you as an individual. Why? Because burnout and secondary trauma don't exist in a vacuum. They affect us all. And the real solution, it lies in approaching these challenges with a community mindset. You know, too often we talk about burnout in terms of self-care, but I want to tell you something, a truth we just can't ignore. The nonprofit work we're doing, it isn't about any one of us. It's about the collective. The mission is far bigger than any one person, whether that's a founder, the executive director, the development director. It's not and has never been just about any one individual. And yes, caring for yourself is essential, but that care should extend beyond just you, because nonprofits are built on collaboration, leaning on one another, and creating a culture of collective care. The strength of our sector, our work, it's rooted in the strength of our relationships. So when we talk about burnout, we need to create space for community care. We are not alone, and we shouldn't bear the weight of it all on our own. Nonprofits are driven by service to the greater good. It's about the mission, the people, the relationships, and the shared vision. Each of us plays a role in supporting one another. And by taking care of each other, we build stronger, more resilient nonprofits. But you might be asking, what does that mean practically, Britt? I want to be clear about something. These strategies aren't going to magically heal any burnout or trauma you might already be dealing with. From personal lived experience, that kind of healing, it takes time. And it's okay if you're not there yet. What these steps can do is help you avoid falling back into that same place. Think of it as building a foundation that helps you and your team stay strong and resilient in the long run because the sector needs you. All right, first up, let's focus on creating a culture of collective care. Are you a leader tuning in? I'm calling all leaders. If so, it's on you to set the tone. Are you checking in with your team regularly? Are you asking them how they're doing as people, not just as workers or anything task related? And are you taking it even deeper? Meaning, are you open about your own struggles, whether it's how you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed? Because let me tell you something, when you set an example, it encourages your team to do the same. They'll feel safer opening up. And when everyone is honest about their challenges, it becomes easier to lean on one another. And I think it's that kind of vulnerability and support which helps prevent burnout before it even starts. So remember, leaders, it's absolutely okay to take a step back, take care of yourself, model that behavior, and make it clear that everyone needs time to recharge. Next up, number 2, let's talk about setting boundaries as a team, not just as individuals. Boundaries aren't just about saying no when you're at your limit. They're about creating a shared understanding that everyone's time and energy needs to be respected. If someone's overloaded, the team should step in and offer to help. If you're a leader and you have the power to do so, reinforce this by setting clear expectations top down around work hours and encourage everyone to disconnect when the workday is over. This is one of the most effective ways to prevent burnout across the team by setting the expectation from the get-go. Number 3, another important piece of the puzzle is fostering peer support systems. Nonprofit work, it can be quite siloed, especially if you're working on a remote team. Burnout often thrives in isolation. So for all the leaders out there, I'm asking you once again, are you creating regular opportunities for your team to connect, share their experiences, and support each other on non-work related topics? Whether that's through Slack, Zoom, or even something more formal, are you giving your team the space to talk and listen to one another and doing so unmonitored? Because this kind of unrecorded safe space, it will ensure that no one feels like they're in this alone. And finally, number 4, advocating for wellness resources together is key. If your organization doesn't already provide mental health days, employee assistant programs, otherwise known as EAPs, or flexible work hours, it's time for the team to stand up or be the one to take the risk and speak up, because when you take bold and courageous steps to bring these issues to light to your leaders, as an individual, even better as a collective, it shows that wellness is a priority for everyone. And by advocating for wellness resources together, you're going to ensure that your team is equipped with the tools and support they need to stay healthy and productive in the long run. Okay, so now that I've given you a small pocketbook of fundamental collective care tools, I just want to leave you with this. Burnout doesn't have to be something you carry alone. You're part of something much bigger than yourself, whether it's your mission, your team, or your community. And if we really want to prevent burnout, we have to embrace collective care together. That means starting by creating spaces where we can support each other, prioritize mental health, and foster an environment where healing happens not just individually, but as a team. So let's make 2025 the year we prioritize collective care and build nonprofit environments where everyone can thrive. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Nonprofit Podcast. I know it can feel overwhelming at times, but remember, taking care of yourself and your team is just as important as the mission you're working toward. Keep an eye out for future episodes where we'll dive into more strategies to nurture both your donors and your team as we head into 2025. Take care of yourselves and stay connected. And hey, don't forget to hit that download button and leave us a review. It really helps others find us. You're here to help others, and we're here to help you. Until next time, stay inspired.
That warm feeling when you help someone, It's not just happiness, it's fulfillment, and we believe it should be available to everyone. From frontline heroes to first-time fundraisers, our tools empower you to help others. This is our mission. This is DonorBox, helping you help others.